morning, evening, afternoon, and all other points in time. You're listening to Ensayne Comics. I'm your host, Haiden Sayne. Alright, thanks for joining me for the kickoff to a series I've been thinking about at least for a few years now. Today for this Zero episode, I figured I'd tell you a little bit about myself, my great love for the graphic literature medium, and, my plans and hopes, what I hope to get out of this show. That sound good? Okay, good. Hopefully. I've been a fan of comics and their related media pretty much as long as I've been on the planet. Several fans around my age and probably a little older. The animated X-Men and Spider-Man series on Fox Kids were huge contributors to my love of superheroes and the medium they came from. I mean, I see X-Men, that show was released around 92, I want to say. And, I was released around 93 from my mom's womb. So I wasn't there for the very beginning. But by the time I was cognizant of television, I was right there watching reruns with my older sister, falling in love with some of Marvel Comics' biggest characters. Great shows. And then a few years after those ended, I was watching the syndicated shows for the most part. But I'm not sure exactly when they ended. But around then, the Justice League animated series became another big enabler of my cape addiction. Whereas the Fox Kids shows got me into the excellent world of Marvel, the JL TV show introduced me to the wider DC universe, at least beyond just Superman and Batman. Where most Americans are kind of born knowing, basically. And that series is definitely responsible for my bias toward Jon Stewart, being my favorite GL, Wally West being, my Flash. I mean, Barry who? And I like those guys, but those are definitely who I always go back to because of that. And of course, I want to see, I would love that, the JL reunion that they keep talking about, some of the cast members. I'd love to see that. And I loved the Justice League versus Fatal 5, if anybody hasn't checked that out. I think it's on DC Universe, and hearing that, you should definitely go see that. It's really good, if you like those shows. And if not, and if you don't. Of course, that's all, TV, but what about my comic book experience? So, quick tangent. I've always enjoyed reading, right? It's always been an important part of my life, and that remains true. And I attribute that love to my family, who read to me and with me for throughout my formative years. And I'm especially thankful to my grandmother, my late grandmother, unfortunately, who experienced several children's books and eventually longer chapter books with me more than anybody else, right? She was at home most of the time, so she shared that with me. That was amazing. And I never really thought about it, but even as I got older and started reading independently, she would often read the books I checked out from the library and would finish them before I would, which is crazy. It just blew my mind as a young kid. And now, she didn't really care for my comic habit, and that's probably rightly so. But I did manage to get her to read a few things. She enjoyed Bone, Jeff Smith's Bone, Amulet, and of course, newspaper strips, such as Peanuts. So just kind of like, I guess, the cartoony kind of stuff, which is awesome. Not much beyond that. That's fine. That was awesome. That was a good time. Now, I don't remember when I actually started becoming aware of comics, or when I even realized that stuff was based on them, right? But from my best recollection, that's backed up by checking release dates of some of my earliest books, which I guess, I could have gotten them a little later, maybe not exactly around that time. But anyway, I think I got a pretty good idea of when I started reading comic books. So the first things I remember buying, or at least someone had bought for me, they were tied very closely to other passions of mine. In the early aughts, I mean, I'm sure before then, but that's my elementary school time. In the early aughts, toys from the awesome Marvel Legends line. They always, at least then, always came packaged with an important issue featuring that toy. Now, I don't think they do that as much anymore. At least not with, 7-inch, 6-inch, however, toys, but I have seen them with the smaller ones. But they always came with a book about that character, or the costume. So, for instance, my Black Suit Spider-Man, a figure that I got, came with a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 252, which is the introduction of that suit into the series after Spidey returns from Secret Wars. I think it actually came out before Secret Wars ended. It may have even came out before he got it in that main series. I can't remember. Another Spidey toy, my battle-damaged Spider-Man, that came with Spider-Man number 5. And so it was the normal blue and red suit. It was all torn up, because in that issue, he had fought the Lizard to a terrible outcome. But, looking at the dates on those toys, which is 2000, both of them. Now, that I could have got them later than that. They might have been late 2000, I got them 2001, whatever. But, that would have been I would have been around 7 or 8, so that making them my very first comic books as far as I can remember. Aside from toy reprints, my other comic purchases at that time were from magazine racks, which is kind of funny because before comic shops, people got their comics from newsstands and racks like spinner racks and stuff and convenience stores or whatever. And I kind of find myself, I have a kind of a parallel track to people, 30, 40 years older than me. It was kind of funny. But the earliest I remember getting that way was from my local movie gallery. Rest in peace. Which itself was a hub of much joy from my youth. Amazing time. But at the desk where you rent your videos, they had, the usual impulse buy stuff, like snacks and drinks for your movies, but they also had comics, brother. And while I admit I skimmed those books probably more than I bought them, the first, and maybe only, book that I definitely remember buying was Sonic the Hedgehog number 111 from Archie Comics. Now, I was and still am a huge, huge gamer. And around that time, I had become a fan of Sonic after playing the classic, which I guess, some people would say, normie, game or whatever, but Sonic Adventure 2 on the GameCube. So this book, was an excellent choice, and it was even cooler because it featured a neat character who I don't even think has ever appeared in the games, and that was Robbo the Hedge. And whose name, might sound like it. He's a pastiche of Robin Hood, who is yet another important character to me, who I love, and definitely the reason for Green Arrow being my favorite DC hero. And of course, I love all the other Archer characters like The Arrow from, I can't remember who published him initially, but I know Dynamite has, or at least had, the license for him later. And of course, Hawkeye and stuff. But for the next year or so, I started getting my books from Harvey's. The grocery store, because I'm a huge gamer. I love, I was reading, amazing book. I don't even know if it's printed anymore. Definitely not printed. I don't know if it comes out anymore. Tips and Tricks. I read that a lot. And, I was looking down the magazine aisle, looking for game stuff, and I see, what is this? This is Iron Man and Captain America fighting on the cover of this book. And what it was a Fantastic Four tie-in to Civil War. I'd become a fan of Fantastic Four around that time from, I'd seen the movie, the first movie, but more importantly, I had been gifted the complete series of the Fantastic Four, going back to animation, but the animated 90s series, which I actually hadn't watched as a kid. Well, as a younger kid. Still a kid then. And now, I guess, and mentally. I've become a huge fan of that. And so I recognize those characters, and that's also a Civil War thing, so it was crazy reading that. Which actually would be years later before I'd read the actual event. I read those tie-ins and other tie-ins, kind of funny. But from there, I moved on to to Books A Million. Just each few months seems like my addiction just got worse and worse. Just getting this stuff all over the place. Middle school, I finally go to my closest comic shop, which is Cool Comics in Valdosta, Georgia. Still go from time to time. Need to go back very shortly, if I can. Get on more, talk about that later. But, and then in high school, I started shopping online for comics. At college, I started reading more digitally, and that's kind of where I am now. I mostly read digital books. But, I go from all these different ways of getting my fix. So, I read, digital comics, occasional online shopping, going to a physical shop when I can. Or, I might impulse buy stuff. I go to Books A Million. Oh, yeah, I'm getting a comic. Or wherever. And, that love has been growing for, 20 years, basically. And I always try to find a spot for it in my life whenever I can. So which brings us to this show. So in college, I was a communication student, a mass media major at Valdosta State University. And while I was there, I took a social media course, which had us picking a topic for the whole semester. It'd be themed around that topic. Some people, they pick, a sports team or a sport. They'd follow that. One guy was like looking at the economic future of Africa. That's where things are going. Which is pretty cool. But, for me, I want to pick something easy because I'm a terrible student. And something I actually enjoy working with. So, boom, comics, of course. So one of the assignments we had throughout the whole semester was to make a daily social media post about our topic. It didn't really matter what it was, but it just had to be related to that. And so I decided what I would do was make a hashtag. It's kind of funny. Like, I think in our book, which I don't even remember the book, it talked about, creating a hashtag for campaigns or whatever. And so I made a super ridiculously long hashtag called Ensayne Comics of the Day, or Ensayne Comic of the Day. I use Ensayne a lot because, Haiden, Sayne, whatever. Genius, right? That I would use that Ensayne comic post to talk about a favorite book of mine. Now, that could sometimes be one book or a limited series or, whatever. But I say a few things about it. And I enjoyed doing that so much that, 4 or 5 years after that class is over, I've already graduated. I'm still doing it on Instagram. I started on Twitter. That was kind of limited with the character restrictions. So I moved to Instagram. It's also a more visual place, so it's more fun. And, I've been having a blast. Got connected to interesting people doing that. Fan stuff of this great medium. And all throughout that time, I've considered taking it beyond just the confines of the written word. Make a podcast. And that's where we're at. Fortunately, unfortunately, however you might think about that. So you might ask, why, man? Why do this? There's plenty of other shows out there with better insight, more articulate hosts. But ultimately, I'm doing this because it's just so much fun to talk about. I love it. And I'm also being a content creator. I'm a entertainer. I hope so. And I'd like to use this platform for me to improve that. To improve my storytelling, or put out some music every once in a while, like my little intro I made on Ambleton. Pretty fun stuff. And of course, work on my performance, especially my speaking. I'm sure you've made it through this, so you realize, maybe not have the best enunciation, best diction. So work on that. Ultimately, I think I'm gonna get a lot out of this by working on this. And maybe this show won't be for a ton of people, but as long as it's fun for me and is productive for me, then I think I'm gonna do it. I think it'll be fun. All right. So for the last couple of minutes, I thought I'd go ahead and explain how I expect a regular episode to break down. So first I'll start with new comics coming out. Not everything, but stuff that interests me. And I'll try my best to release shows in time for just before Wednesday when new comics came out, or at the time of this recording they did. So with the pandemic right now, it's got comics in a weird place because new stuff isn't coming out, at least not from the big publishers, because their Diamond, their distributor, is not releasing anything right now. So if after this the comic book industry looks similar to the way it did before that, then I will try to have stuff in time for you to make a decision to read something if you want, or however it shakes out, maybe different. From there, I move on to any comic related news that I find cool. So that could be a new creative team on a book or whatever, people changing companies, maybe movie or television news or whatever I find interesting and want to talk about, good or bad. Hopefully good. That would be the hope. And then, finish off the rest of the episode devoted to a longer discussion of my Ensayne Comic of the Day picks. So, I talk a little bit about it on Instagram, but then I'll talk more in depth about ones especially that I find interesting. And, depending on how things go, I might even, plan to release weekly, so maybe I could tell you what the book would be the previous week, so you would have time to read it, and we could kind of make a book club thing about it. And also, eventually hope to have some guests on here, so I can interview them about what they like about the media. Maybe they're new to it, or they've been into it for a long time, maybe longer than me, and I can get their take if we have time, or whatever, how schedules and everything. They can give their take on the news and the new releases, and then have them into the main discussion with them as well. So, there's lots of ways to go about this, and it might be bumpy until I can get a good groove going, but I'm excited to get started. I love talking about this stuff, and I don't always have a good forum to do that, so I decided, I'm going to make it myself, and I'm really digging it so far. So as we progress, I'll let you know a little bit about other projects I've got going on, music, whatever. But, like most people who love comics, they also have aspirations to make their own. And that's what I do. Poorly, but I do make comics too. And I'm not going to tell you a little about them just yet. You may know already, hopefully. That'd be sweet. Oh, that'd be awesome. But that'll be fun to share in the future. Anyways, so that's just about it. Thanks so much for listening. Before I leave, I thought I'd recommend a few great shows that I enjoy. That kind of, many of which have influenced me to do this. This Week in Marvel is a great one. I don't know if I haven't listened to them in years, but they were the first podcast that I ever listened to. Got me through college, for sure. But I definitely, there's some influence there in how they structure their show, used to. Word Balloon with John Suntress. Oh, Amazing show. Definitely check that out. That's without a doubt, the best comic podcast produced right now. So, the exact opposite of mine. Between the Gutters is super fun. They also they post great stuff on social media as well, so check them out there. Instagram is where I follow them. And Joe on Joe with Joe Slepsky is a fantastic, hope I said his last name right, goodness, is a fantastic G.I. Joe pod. That one really proved to me that someone can make an enjoyable show even without interviews. Joe does have people on from time to time, but much of it is just him talking about G.I. Joe TV shows and comics and stuff. And that's kind of how I imagine my show will be predominantly. Robert Meyer Burnett's Robservations, that's not a podcast, but it's a YouTube show that is a great example of that as well. And lastly, not least, the Black Sheep Conversations, co-hosted by Eric Vinson, who was a classmate of mine. He interviews people, not always interviews. I forget who his co-host is. I apologize, brother. But one big thing they do is interview local artists and stuff from Valdosta, Georgia. So that's pretty awesome. But anyway, I hope that's some good stuff for you to check out if you haven't. Definitely go check them out. Well, I think that's gonna do it for the Zero episode here. Thanks for joining me, if you did. I'm really excited to see, what discussions we can get into in the future. But anyways, once again, this is Haiden Ensayne. Thanks for listening to Ensayne Comics.